Marvin Bagley III has been absolutely spectacular.
Bagley, to me, has star written all over him.
Marvin Bagley right now is the best player in college basketball. Marvin Bagley!
Get ready, folks. He is a problem, a massive problem.
Can you hear me now? Good, because all of the truth about Marvin Bagley.
No offense to Marvin, but when one of these games going to start happening?
I'm sorry to say it, Marvin Bagley is a bust.
It wasn't so long ago that Marvin Bagley was known as one of the best prospects of all time, and that's no exaggeration. As a high school center who looked like a lefty Anthony Davis with a much smoother isolation game and a perfect-looking jump shot, being unanimously ranked ahead of Zion, the most hyped high school prospect in recent years, before skipping a grade to be ranked number one in that class, was just what came with the territory, I guess. For a few years span, Bagley looked like as close to a guarantee of an instant boom in the NBA as you can get, with multiple professional scouts tipping their caps to him as the best they've ever seen at that level. Fast forward to a little over 4 years later, reading through the top picks of the draft, there's clearly one name that stands out way more than the others as the guy who never panned out. With seemingly every tool needed to be transcendent at the power forward position, how did a prospect who seemed to be made in a lab royally flop in the NBA? Subscribe. With a dad who played collegiate basketball and a grandfather who made it all the way to the league, Bagley had some massive shoes to fill, but it took him about 13 years to already outgrow them. As a middle school mixtape machine, Marvin Bagley was one of the few that can say they earned high major recognition before ever suiting up for a high school game. At 13 years old and throwing down hammers in his middle school basketball games, Marvin Bagley was big time from the jump. With NBA player Jordan Bell saying the middle schooler was already capable of playing at the Division I level, local Arizona schools tried to get a piece of the kid to scoop him up before the explosion that many saw coming hits, giving Bagley his first Division I scholarship out of a traveling basketball team. Coming into his freshman year, everyone who had seen this kid play was in for no sort of surprise, and those who didn't know him figured it out pretty quick. Taking home a state championship as a freshman in dominating fashion, to say that his play was impressive would be an understatement. Receiving offers from schools like Kentucky, Duke, and UCLA before he got his learner's permit. At just under 20-10 with 16 scholarships, the freshman star clearly was blessed with abnormal athletic gifts at a crazy 6'10 frame, with coordination and skills well above his age and below his height, with his future set to play out as well as he could ask already. The next move was to jump ship to play with the best local talent possible at Hillcrest Prep, alongside the number one upcoming junior in DeAndre Ayton. After AAU showouts and a preseason full of posters and lobs from half court, Bagley climbed to not only the top sophomore in the country, but even slotted in as ESPN's number one ranking as the best prospect regardless of class before his sophomore season. Unfortunately, Bagley would choose to leave his home state of Arizona for the bright lights of Sierra Canyon, a basketball powerhouse in Southern California. In a ruling that very rarely gets upheld, Bagley would actually get called out for transferring for athletic reasons despite his very convincing effort of saying he was focused on books and shit. In a controversy that seemed important at the moment, it was pretty quickly forgotten, mainly due to what came next. Junior year Marvin Bagley was now far and away the best player in the country, sliding in as a 6'10-ish power forward who could easily take anyone from the perimeter, finish inside over top of you if he wanted to, give it to you any way you want it with his back to the basket, and also could throw some disgusting dimes if you tried to double him. With a great-looking jump shot that he had no hesitation to pull up with from the mid-range or spot up on the wings, Bagley was a disgusting pick-and-roll or face-up threat with a deep bag of moves to go to that compiled with his astronomical athleticism to make him one of the best high school talents that I've ever seen. As an outsider looking in during this time, his game looked to me as modern as can be. A DeMarcus Cousins-esque scorer with an array of quick yet effective half-court moves to break down slow-footed bigs, and post-up moves to bully a mouse if you put a quicker-footed wing on him. With a very smooth, aesthetically pleasing game for his size, this was not even where his biggest strength lied, as with the opportunity to push in transition as a hyper-athletic ball-handling forward, there was nothing he couldn't do. Even with his defense being a known liability at 2 blocks a game, his athleticism just bailed him out, especially his pogo stick second jump bailing him out of his rather undisciplined play on that side of the ball. with the potential to become a switchy big with rim protection capabilities. Even though that was a ways away, there's no denying that the ceiling was scary if he continued to develop skills which have been polished more than players who rely on athleticism as heavily as he does. At 25-10, playing with and against the top talent in the nation, no one was coming for his number one spot in the 2018 class. So much so, in fact, that after his junior year, he was ready to graduate high school, reclassifying to 2017, and still remained as the best player the country had to offer. Shortly after the reclassification, with every high major offer he could ask for, becoming the next high school star to go to the Blue Devils was kind of no surprise for the dude who jumped ship to Sierra Canyon. Despite taking the basic top prospect route, he still stood out even amongst top seasons from top players. Marvin Bagley was incredible at the collegiate level. At 21-11 on 61% shooting and 40% from deep, when it came to rebounding and scoring the ball at this level, there were very few like him. I mean, with per 100 averages of hyper-efficient 35 and 18, this is pretty clearly just domination. He displayed a lot this year, most of which we already knew, of course, taking guys off the bounce, a more proven 3-ball, improved footwork and touch out of the post, a super high motor, averaging 4 offensive rebounds a game. The last of which you really love to see out of a player with this talent level as a coach. As an obvious top NBA prospect, he was a one-and-done, big shocker, and the scouts obviously loved a lot of his game, but in retrospect, do have a few mixed reviews in there. Bagley was kind of looked at as a pretty safe bet as a prospect, with an already proven jump shot, polished game, athleticism, yada yada, you get it by now. But as great as his game was at this level, to consider him NBA ready was not exactly true. There were holes in his game that you see with plenty of guys that get exposed at the next level. First and foremost, yes, his defense sucked. At 1 block per 40 minutes, for someone this athletic, that's pretty dog shit, honestly. Blocks aren't everything and really aren't the most indicative of defensive impact, but all in all, his talent, which should have propelled him into being an amazing defender, was completely limited by his low defensive IQ, making poor reads, helping late, gambling on plays as a 4, just to get beaten on the perimeter. His defense was a project, but still seemed to have a potential light at the end of the tunnel. Offensively as well, there was a few notable weaknesses. At 1.8 assists and 2.7 turnovers per 40 minutes, he was a total black hole. With double teams resulting in a turnover over 25% of the time, his lack of vision mixed with unwillingness to pass at times was often hidden when he can barrel to the basket, but at this point, it was the end of that. Having success in college really isn't too difficult when you're a few notches above everyone talent-wise. But once you match him up with an NBA defender, it's going to be easy to exploit that he's a guy who doesn't really pass, isn't too strong, and doesn't exactly have a go-to post move that he's really gotten down, and had a right hand that he went out of his way to not use. He had his flaws, but I don't mean to write him off as an undeserving of his projection in the top 3, next to Ayton and Luka Doncic, as at this time it was clear that you don't let a guy with this much talent slip very far. And as the lottery balls fell, giving the Suns the number 1 pick, after Ayton's season with Arizona, he was pretty widely expected to go number 1, and before America really caught a grasp on how insane what Luka was doing overseas was, he was looked at as more of a risk than the guaranteed upside of Marvin Bagley. As most people predicted, the Suns would take Ayton number 1, the Kings would take Bagley number 2, and the Mavericks would take Doncic number 3. Of course, as we know now, being the guy drafted ahead of Luka Doncic, who was on his way to becoming one of the best players to ever pick up a basketball, is going to shine a spotlight on you, and more so on your shortcomings. But as times have played out, the selection of Bagley meant that the Kings were passing on stars Luka, Jaren Jackson Jr., and Trae Young the next 3 picks, and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander at number 11. Proving to be a deeper draft than initially thought, with Mikal and Miles Bridges, Brunson, Mitchell Robinson, and Gary Trent Jr., as well as plenty of other impactful players in the NBA throughout the draft. With a lot of talent to go around, the selection of Marvin Bagley to pair as a pick-and-roll partner with De'Aaron Fox was still a cool-ass duo. 2 up-tempo guys who have room to grow together. It actually fit pretty well in theory, made this team interesting regardless. And coming into the season with a decent role as the 6th man, on a team that had improved to be decent in the West, Marvin Bagley came out playing very decent. Throughout the first 26 games of the season and 23 minutes played, he he would put up pretty solid totals of nearly 13 and 6 on near 54 and 35 shooting splits. Not lighting the world on fire like the European dude on the Mavericks, but not really what I would call a disappointing start to a career either. This would unfortunately be where Bagley would experience his first real professional setback with a left knee sprain that would sideline him the next 11 games. With a little bump in the road, it would only cause a minor setback before he would be reintroduced to the rotation and gradually climb into the starting lineup. As he picked up steam on the back nine of his rookie season, at stints he definitely looked great with averages of 23 and 9 on 53% shooting and 44% deep right before sadly re-spraining his knee. With season averages of 15 and 7.6, his production was still solid for a rookie, earning a spot on the all-rookie first team. With flashes of potential growing alongside him, it was an alright season, but really this run did not last for long as the Kings' luck and stupidity always has to shine on through. With the fire of Dave Yeager and the hiring of Luke Walton, the worst coach in the league, the Kings' pace of play would fall from 5th to 20th in the league. A team that's basically begging to run and gun, this was only a piece of the mismanagement that would unfold on this team. But I guess it didn't even really matter as Bagley would fail to play over 8 games in a row this year, dealing with multiple dragging injuries that kept him off the floor for most of the season. In a 13-game run that generally saw no improvement. With a pretty slow start to his career, largely due to injuries, the bust chatter already began to come out a little bit. Really more than that, after 2 years, Bagley was kind of forgotten about, scoring 14 a game every year, grabbing like 6.5 boards, maybe getting a block. I mean, that's cool, I guess. Despite his averages being alright, there's really no way that Marvin Bagley was helping you win any games at this point. As a bad free throw shooter, a not good enough 3-point shooter to be worth a damn, an abysmal defender, and a black hole, I mean, there was no element that he began to turn a corner in. 3 years in and he still didn't know when to help. He couldn't stutter his feet on a closeout and get burned every time. And most importantly, he just couldn't stay on the floor. 3 years of ineffective mediocrity had already turned the phenom to kind of an afterthought. As time went on and he looked for his payday, the Kings were not willing to negotiate his extension, giving up on the Marvin Bagley experiment partway through the 2022 season. In a quick dump-off to Detroit for DiVincenzo and then a bunch of other draft busts, Bagley found a new career putting up empty stats for one of the worst teams in the league. Despite YouTube clickbait claiming that Detroit was reviving his career, playing just 42 games with 14 and 7 averages again is just a disappointment. With the potential to do such great things in the league, Bagley clearly just can't even fit into it. As a guy who's too weak to guard posts, and with the complete lack of defensive intangibles and basic skills to fit into a system, I don't really know what you do with them. But I guess with a new $37 million extension in Detroit, the answer is most likely to just put up empty average stats on the worst team in the NBA while being on and off the injury reserve list for the foreseeable future. Despite the injuries he's battled through his whole career having a big impact on him so far, I don't think I've seen many careers as frustrating to watch unfold as this one. With all of the gifts in the world, Bagley coming in as a dude grabbing offensive rebounds off the bench makes calling him a bust seem kinda justified, despite the excuses you could give for him. As each day passes and seemingly gets wasted of his developmental years, it's hard to see him making a hard turnaround out of mediocrity at this point. I guess putting together a career as a part-time bench plug may not be what you want out of the best prospect this generation's ever seen, but I guess at least it's better than his partner on the block in James Wiseman. Make sure to check out that video here, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace out.